Right. Again, good day, everyone. For those of us working on our project, those of us trying to sort out our projects, to celebrate you. Thank you for being tenacious, for holding up until this time. We celebrate all our tech mentors, we celebrate our trainers, everyone that has given time to make this a reality and to make it possible. Thank you, Cephas. I saw that you joined early. Thank you so much for joining us from Delta State in Nigeria. A lot of us, some people are joining from, all over the world. Thank you for the representation from Nigeria, West Africa, North America, um, England, Europe, everywhere we're joining from. Celebrate you. Thank you so very much. Um, so on a very light note, yes, Rebecca joining from UK. Thank you, Rebecca. On a very light note, I want to I know things happen a little. People are like, what's going on with this project? Some people are thinking it's so difficult, it's so hard. On a light note, we as Techstylers, we want us to just carry it on as something, something additional to our lives as we go on. It's um it's one of the things that we believe as tech sellers that's going to add to all of us, going to add value to all of us essentially as we go ahead. And that's why, along the line we are bringing to you soft skills just so that, apart from the technical things that we do, we can also have a bit of, some inspiration to go along as we engage in these technical activities that we are in. The last time we talked about presentation skills, team building, teamwork, and today we are so very interested in your progress, in our collective progress. We're interested in getting to a point where we can have someone from the cohort become a tech mentor or become a speaker during our inspirational session. That's one of the things we look forward to. We look forward to connecting beyond here and beyond now. So if you know that we are going on this path together, can I just see your reactions in the chat? Or can I see your reactions on the call to say, yes, we are in this together. Next time I'm going to be a tech mentor. Next time I'm going to be a guest speaker on the call. We are we always look out for such inspirational stories. We always look out for, thank you, I can see your reactions. Thank you. We always look out for people who stepped up from, point A to point B, because that's our intention. And so we'll dive right into today's session right about now. As it says, please pen out your questions. The Q&A is also open. Should you have specific questions for the guest speaker today? The session is being recorded as we go on. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking, and we encourage you to please follow us on our social media handles. Techstylers, yes, we're a community focused on supporting women and men who desire growth in technology, and we want to bring more and more people into tech through training and mentorship. So you will also notice that even as we do tech, we also encourage low code and no code tech to encourage everyone to come along on this tech journey. Please follow us on social media. We actually meet up. We have inspirational sessions every month. Last Saturday of the month. Should some people not be aware, all our sessions are currently on YouTube right now, and as we are already in the community, we will keep posting every month where we have sessions. Please follow us on social media, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, if you're not following us already. So our guest speaker today is loaded with project management skills, because our projects, we would want a situation where we carry on this project into real life scenarios, carry on this project into our career, into our daily lives, and we hope that we are able to, translate this to something that is usable, either whatever is either the app that you have worked on, or the knowledge you have gained in the training, or the people that you worked with, interacted with, maybe you've gained some people management skills. We want that at the end of the day, at some point in time, you are able to use this in real life, because this, as a tech person, there's no how we do not engage in projects at some point in time. So today, our guest speaker is Indy Freke Okon. He's called Indy. I mean, before the meeting started, he introduced himself again as Indy, and thank you for joining us. The business analyst and a project manager. He hails from the captivating South part of Nigeria, West. He's a seasoned project management professional with over 6 years experience. He's adeptly led projects within Nigeria and internationally. So today he is here to inspire us to stay driven and focused on achieving our project objectives. If you remember, we all have project objectives and what we are being graded for in every one of us projects. So here is his LinkedIn. Please connect with him. And today we are having a session titled called Project Management 101: Stages of How to Successfully Manage a Project. Thank you very much, Indifreke. We celebrate you and we appreciate you for joining us today. The floor is yours. And my people are already giving you high five, that they're sending you love emojis. We're clapping for you already. We celebrate you and we can't wait to gain from this knowledge.
Thank you very much, Lara. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to appreciate you all for the opportunity to speak to you on project management. Thank you for the introduction, Lara. I would say I'm much more handsome than the picture you used, though. That's quite a very old picture, but
Yes, I see.
nonetheless, nonetheless, I'm happy to be here, and I hope in the next few minutes we'll be able to get a few things from what I have to say regarding project management. First, I want to also shout out to your to Olajumoke Toriola. She's been a big immense factor in my journey as a project manager, and I cannot say I'm a project manager without her in my story. So, big ups, ma. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and I have a few things to say. Quickly, my name is Indy Freke, and everyone who knows me calls me Andy. It's more convenient to call me that. And today I'll be, speaking a little about the stages of project management and giving you some tips on how to successfully manage a project. First, I want to say that you have to know that everyone is a potential project manager and everyone has engaged in projects one way or another. Sometimes people think of project and think about it in, oh, you're doing a project for a company, it must be one big complicated endeavor. Yes, sometimes projects could be really complicated, but I want us all to, while we go into this study, build up some scenarios in our heads, so that by the time we start looking at the stages and the tips for success, you can easily relate them to something you must have done in the past without knowing that this is a project or you have engaged in project. So first I want you to think about your group, family life, how maybe a father in the house wakes up on a Friday and realizes that, okay, on Saturday I would have some visitors come to the house, and decides that, okay, he needs the entire house to be cleaned on Saturday. He needs a lot to be done. He calls his wife, he tells his wife, oh, I need you to gather the children. They need to sweep the floor, they need to mop it, they need to wash the toilet, they need to do laundry. He gives them all of that instructions, and he ends up going on Saturday morning. He ends up going for maybe a street meeting where he would eventually bring, his friends or the visitors down to the house after the meeting, say 1 p.m. He has told them to complete everything by 1 p.m. That is a potential project in itself. That's the ideation of a project, without him knowing that a project has been born. So just walk with me as we go through, projects and, the stages and how to manage a successful project. Just some tips on it. So first, I would go through, just a little talk on why project management is important. What is even What is project management? Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, project management, project." What do we understand by project management? So basically, project management is the act of it's a coordinated effort by a group of people. You're putting a plan together, you're executing that plan in order to achieve a goal. And when we talk about goals for projects in this scope, in this sense, we are looking at what is the scope of the project. So you want to achieve that scope, you want to do it on time, and you want to do it within budget. This is very three important aspects of project everyone must understand. Sometimes in project management, we call it the triple constraint, because at all times during your project, you have to ensure that a goal is being met, and you're doing it at a certain time, because projects don't run forever. You can't say you're doing a project and you don't have a time, you're looking to actualize that project, because a project has to be timed. It's not something you do forever. And projects also demands resources, and these resources could be financial and otherwise, and that's why most times you have a budget. And for you to execute this thing you call a project, you have to follow certain processes. You have to have certain skills, communication skills, empathy, emotional intelligence. These are skills that a project manager ought to possess. And then by experience, certain things would come into play: how to read people, how to understand, a situation, how to read a room, how to communicate. Because it's one thing to be able to say XYZ. It's another thing to know when to say it and how to say it, which is communication. Communication goes beyond just saying this project is completed or we are at this milestone. No, it goes beyond that. So as we go along with the stages, I'm going to expose to you how all projects flows through the stages, whether they are big projects, whether they are small projects, they all go through the stages. Please confirm you can still hear me and see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right, great. So one of the reasons we all engage in projects is because it makes life easy. It makes your work efficient. It just improves whatever you're doing. It reduces your time and cost overrun. So rather than just things coming to you, so, as a surprise, you're able to have planned and manage all of this, way, way, way ahead of time. You're able to streamline your project execution. So you know what you want to do, you know what is within scope, you know what is out of scope. Take, for example, the family project we're talking about. The father must have said clean the house, but he has put some conditions. Okay, there will be no need to weed the compound. You will consider this out of scope for that engagement. So this way you have streamlined what you expect your kids and the family members to do on this particular project. You also enhance its quality, because this way you're able to, at the very, not even at the very beginning, you're able to establish quality controls. You're able to set the expectations right. You're able to ensure that people meet and even exceed the expectation based on these quality controls you have set. And another importance of the project management to any project is the ability to help you foresee risks and manage them. This way, when you follow these stages of project management, you're able to identify what risks you encounter and how to manage them. For example, going back to the family example, you realize that a a father or the mother can then identify that, okay, if we're going to be cleaning the entire house tomorrow, we need to get detergent. There's currently no detergent, right? Or for example, if we're going to start at 7 a.m., we will need water, and where we will need to fetch water from, they open at 7:30. How do we manage this? Project management helps you to foresee all of these risks, and helps you even to plan how you manage these risks throughout the entire life cycle of a project. When I mean life cycle, I mean from the very first stage where we are going to till the very last stage of the project. So with this in mind, allow me to introduce you to the various stages of project management. So project management typically has 5 stages, 5 really important stages. From the initiation stage, which is the very first stage, we have the planning stage. This is one of the most important stages of a project. You know how the common adage goes that if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. if you do not properly plan a project, right, you most likely will encounter a lot of issues going into the other phases of that project. So, typically, as project managers, you need to ensure that a lot has gone into your planning, you know, your planning phase of the project, you know, and I would explain all of the activities that come under this planning phase. We also have the execution phase, which goes also with the monitoring and control phase. And the sweetest part of project management, this is the part every project manager looks forward to when you're closing a project, especially when you're closing a successful project. It gives this feeling that you can only experience, you know, when you complete a task. So take, for example, the family project. If at the end of the day the house is sparkling clean, visitors come, they're impressed and all that, there's this feeling, you, the kids, even the father would have, that, it went really well. So these are the 5 stages of project management, and I'm going to go further to explain what activities go on in these stages, and then you can relate it to even the project you've been involved with if you did not take notice of it, or you can even relate it to future projects and know that, okay, this is how you will go about the projects in the future. All right, so we go to the first stage, initiation stage. Please just confirm you can all still hear me and see my screen.
Can hear you.
Great. So for the initiation stage, this is where the idea of the project is born. Typically, if you take large organizations, for example, you realize that this is where probably the CEO or the MD or the head of IT. Please, is there a question?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. So this is where the CEO has this idea, and he's looking at, making profits or solving a problem. There's a problem he needs to solve, or there's an opportunity he needs to capitalize on, and then he has this goal in mind that he wants to do certain things. So if you go back to the family example, you realize that the goal or the ideation was, the father wants to entertain a few visitors and he wants the house to be sparkling clean, right? And in this case, he now goes further to identify who are the stakeholders, to make this happen. Who are the stakeholders? That stakeholders could be in various forms. We'll come to that. So, for example, um, a company who wants to engage in an IT project will realize that the stakeholders will be probably the head of IT. He needs to engage the head of IT and also share this idea with the head of IT. He brings in a project manager on board who now goes ahead to bring in other resources, other in quote stakeholders. Now there is a project charter document. This is the phase, the initiation phase is where the charter document is being prepared. So basically, a project charter is a very short document that just gives an overview of what the project is trying to solve, or what opportunity is trying to capitalize on. The aim of the project is typically being drawn out by the owner, for example, the MD, or sometimes even the project with the assistance of the project manager. What this document does is it helps those at the higher level, the higher stakeholders, for example, the board members, to at a glance see what the project is trying to achieve. It gives them a eye view, bird eye view focus of what the project is trying to achieve. This way, at all times, they can, while they are tracking the project, they can see that it's going through, or it's following through the actual aim of the project. And then in the initiation phase is where we have feasibility studies, we have gap analysis, we try to look at if the aim of this project actually fits into what the business organization goal is overall. So, for example, going back to the so I'm going to be relating this a lot to the simple project which I just explained early on, a family project, so that it's easy to understand all of these concepts. So, in this case, this would be like the father coming to see that, okay, if I'm going to be bringing people home, is it really true that they are them being comfortable would lie with how clean or how good looking the house is, and he knows that yes, this is true. So he is justified, so to speak, for proceeding with this project. So that's basically the initiation phase. So in the initiation phase, it's more high level in terms of the project manager and other stakeholders being heavily involved here. Now when we go through other stages, you realize that other team members are brought in. The group becomes larger, the expectations become different, and they will see it as we go ahead. Now we have the very second stage of project management, which is the planning stage, and this is the stage I said is really, really important. This is a stage where a lot of what will be achieved in the project is talked about, is planned, is decided, is defined, basically. This stage starts with a series of meetings, a series of coming together from different people, the project manager bringing the team together, putting together a team, a development team, so to speak. Could be product owners, could be designers, QAs, developer, depending on the nature, engineers, depending on the nature of the project. And the idea is for him to develop a project plan. Now, this plan is going to be like the manual or the guide that helps them achieve the project, helps them actualize this project. This is going to be like their Bible in quotes, where they follow this manual, they follow this plan, they follow this guide to achieve what they want. The project plan basically defines things around the timeline, the activities to be done, the work, the milestones to be achieved, when they will be achieved, who is responsible for what, and who is supposed to be accountable for what. Basically, it just like I said, it's a full guide of what would be achieved. And this day and age, we have a lot of tools that helps people manage a project. So you could easily decide to use, we could use Microsoft Project Plan. However, we have simpler tools like Jira, Azure DevOps. If you see my screen, you'll see a planner. You can use a tool as simple as a planner, where you could put down certain things like, what tax is coming. You could arrange it in any way you want. You have a backlog. A backlog simply means all of the activities you look to be achieving, who is responsible for it, what these activities are, what are the acceptance criteria, what would you say have been done to 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 conclude that this activity is done. That's what we mean by acceptance criteria. How do we know that you've done activity ABC? For example, how do we know you have cleaned the floor? You have to look at the floor and see that it has been mopped. It has to be shining. These are the ways you now accept that, oh, this particular task of cleaning the floor has been done. So you could create buckets and decide that you want to put certain tasks that will start before some other tasks. You want to be able to monitor the tasks that are in progress. You want to be able to know the tasks that have gone to QA for testing, the tasks that are completed and all of that. And you could use a simple planner for that. You could use various tools to achieve this project plan. Now, in this stage where you also are planning the project, this is where you define the scope. This is where you define what is out of scope. This is where you plan the schedule, like I said earlier. This is where you define the costs, the budgets. So how do you define the scope? Based on the charter, based on the aim from the initiation phase, you're able to now further break it down and say, okay, for us to achieve this aim, for us to achieve this goal set by the MD or the CEO, we need to do all of these activities. For example, for us to achieve a clean house, the family example, I'm going back to the family example, we need to sweep the floor, we need to mop it, we need to clean the toilets, we need to dust the furnitures. All of this will constitute, making sure that the original aim, which is a clean house, to entertain visitors. You need to cook. Yes, that's another thing. You need to cook because the visitors are going to eat. So this will constitute the scope of what you're doing. At the same time, you're also going to be defining in this stage, you're going to be defining what is out of scope. We usually call it scope creep in project management. So it simply means things that are not within the scope. So you could, for example, use something like maybe within the compound. For For example, you could decide that, okay, for these visitors who are coming, we only want to clean inside the house. We're not going to be within the compound. So you can consider within the compound out of the scope of, this particular project. Now you have your schedule and you're deciding that, okay, you need to get all of this done between maybe 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning till 1 p.m. So you need to clean, you need to dust, you need to mop, you need to wash, you need to cook, all within a specific timeline. And then maybe the head of the family is looking at, okay, for this activity, we're going to be spending 5,000 naira to buy detergent, to buy mops, to buy packers, to buy brooms, to buy, dusting sheets and all of that. That is the budget he's working with. So at this planning stage, this is where all of these are decided. Also in the planning stage, this is where you identify. So just to let you know, project management is a wild field. So we can only learn so much about project management in a day or in 30, 45 minutes. There's a whole lot more that goes on in these stages. So I'm just giving you the most important and the common things you would always encounter. In these stages also, there are a lot of documentation that comes to mind, but we'll get more of this as we go along. So as I was saying, in this particular stage, this is where you now properly identify your resources and assign roles. For example, you need to identify that this is the person that will be the leader of the team. This is the person that will do this sort of work, that will do the cleaning. This is the person that will do the mopping. This is the person that will do the cooking, and then you assign these roles to these people. So all of these people would be part of these meetings. These meetings would usually constitute like your sprint planning, where you're doing all this, you're establishing capacity, you're establishing who and who is in your team, what would they be doing. So all of this comes into the planning phase. As also during this planning phase, you're going to be developing some documents and even the risk management. So the risk management basically means you're looking at the big picture. What could hinder our success? What opportunities can we take from these risks, or what risks can we just accept because we have no choice? For example, in the family example that I gave, one of the risks could be because there's no detergent. So it means that this risk you cannot accept it because without detergent you cannot really do a proper clean job, right? So you identify this early on in the project during the planning phase, and then you create a plan of how you mitigate it. So for detergent, it means that in the morning we have to go get detergent. It means that we have to, maybe a mitigation plan, we have to go to our neighbor's house and ask or beg for detergent or something, or go and buy or order a detergent for us to use. These are the things you identify. And one of the things about risks is you have to monitor them all through the project. There are some risks you might not identify at the beginning. They will come up during the course of the project. But because you have you're not risk averse, that means you have a risk mindset. When this comes, you're not going to panic. You're going to know that, okay, you just need to find a way, go back to your risk management. What kind of management plans do you accept this risk? Do you reject it? Is it a risk that you can walk around? Is there something else as an alternative you will do? And all of this will just ensure that your project at the end of the day goes very smoothly. And then communication. One big part of being a project manager, is communication. You cannot run away from it. You're going to be communicating with your team members. You're going to be communicating with project sponsors. You're going to be communicating with stakeholders. So at the early stage, you need to devise a communication plan. How do you intend to keep your stakeholders happy? How do you intend to keep them informed? How do you intend to keep your team members motivated? You need to communicate, prepare a communication plan early on. When we go to tips for how to manage a project successfully, I'm going to be speaking more about communication and how this goes. So speaking on the planning stage, like I said, this is a really important stage in project management. And when you plan properly, it is easy to achieve your goals at the end of the day. Now, after all said and done, after all planning has been done, sometimes people get lost in the details of the planning, and then there is already a sense of fulfillment of the project before even going to execution. But at the end of planning, you have to still go and execute this plan that you have made. Part of what we call part of what constitutes the execution of the plan is actually the actual work you'll be doing. So this is when the son is sweeping the floor, or the daughter is washing the toilet, or the mom is preparing the food in the kitchen. This is actually the execution phase of a project. It's also a really, really important phase. And this is where a project manager gets to really coordinate affairs. So you're not just coordinating the work that people are doing, but you're also managing the people. You're managing the team dynamics. You are following the plan you have made during during the planning phase. You're ensuring that people are doing what they need to do. You're ensuring they are doing it in the time they are expected to do it. Because with projects, a lot of tasks would be such that you cannot do a certain task until you have done a previous task. So you're going to ensure that whoever is in charge of the previous task is doing his task and doing it on time, so that somebody else doing a task that needs to be done afterwards is doing that. For example, you cannot mop a house before you sweep it. So you need to ensure that whoever is sweeping needs to sweep first, so the person who is doing the mopping can do it afterwards. This applies with any project you'll be working with. There are some tasks you cannot do until others are completed. It is just how project works. Now you're managing team dynamics, and this is the interesting part of project management, because while your team might constitute of different set of people in different projects, the way you handle each member of a team is different. No two individuals are the same. No two projects are the same. The dynamics of a team requires a project manager to have emotional intelligence in handling a team. Project team members are typically very interesting for people, because they all have different temperaments, they have different needs, they have different ways to get them motivated to do the work. So in this stage, this is where you are able to figure out how what makes each individual tick. What is that thing that team member A would like to hear, and what do you think you can get to make him do the work? That is not the same way a second team member B would like to be told certain things. For example, the person cooking might not like to be told, oh, please put more salt in the food. The person expects, if it's a senior person, they expect that you shouldn't have to tell them that, right? Because they know. Some other team members want you to be giving your opinions every time. Please come and help me test this salt, because that is the way they feel they can provide the value that's expected of them. So you have to understand how all your team members expect to be motivated, and that is the way you treat each of them. You have to also create a positive environment within the team and build a team that is independent enough and can handle conflict, because you're going to be managing conflicts also within the team and even outside of the team. So you need a mature team. You need to be able to coach your team, because in this stage, it goes just beyond the team doing the work and you checking on them all of the time. No, you need to be able to coach them as to how to manage even within themselves. And then you're also going to be checking for quality in this phase. So you have, it depends on the project, the kind of project, you will have people who are dedicated to checking the quality of work that other team members are doing. If it's a development project, you're going to have QAs, quality assurance people checking it. So like I said, no projects are the same, and the dynamics of each team would always be different. You just have to tailor whatever you do as a project management or project manager during this phase to what the team requires. Please, if you have questions during the course of this, just pen them down. I'll be happy to take them as we go forward towards the end of the session. So I'm going to try and speed this up so that we can get the best value for this time. Now we're going to the fourth stage of project management, which is the monitoring and controlling phase. Now this is the phase that goes hand in hand with execution, because in this very stage you are tracking the performance of the project. You are looking at the project against the project plan that you have made earlier on. Are we going? Are we in line with what we have planned? Are we still maintaining the schedule we have planned to maintain? Are we still within the cost or the budget that we have set out from the beginning of this project? Now, at this stage of the project, there's a whole lot more going on, with informing the stakeholders, in managing changes to the project, because the nature of project is, especially when you start dealing with projects, in an agile form, is that there will be changes required at some point. So how does this change impact the other aspects of the project in terms of its cost, in terms of its scope, in terms of its timeline? How do you ensure that when these changes come, they can fit into this, or if they are out of scope, you can formulate another plan or another a way to incorporate them into the project, with the stakeholders being heavily involved. This is an ongoing process during the course of the project, when the project has started, when the execution phase has started. So take, for example, let's go back to our family example. If at some point the mother decides that, oh, instead of just sweeping the toilet alone, we've swept it but it's still looking somehow, we need to mop it. That's a change that is required, but this change might not necessarily affect a lot in the project, in terms that it might not affect the cost or the timeline. Maybe the toilet is a very small area and it will take maybe 2 minutes to mop when you're mopping the parlor. Then that's a change that can be introduced. So you have to look at these changes against how they affect the project. But take, for example, the father now calls and says, oh, we need to weed the compound. This is a significant change. Actually, this is even out of scope. Now, you as the project manager have to now determine, how does this affect the project? How does this affect the timeline? For example, if we were expected to be done with all of this by 1 p.m., are we still going to be able to meet 1 p.m.? Are we going to need to increase the budget, because in this instance now we are going to need to buy shovels, or we're going to need to buy cutlasses, or we're going to need to hire a handyman to come and weed the compound? How is this going to impact the budget? Now, because this is out of scope already, it means that there is going to be a shift in the other constraints, which is time and costs. And then you are reporting this information back to the stakeholder, which is the father. Do we go ahead? Do we not go ahead? And then decide, okay, yes, I'll provide the money to do this. We can go ahead, or no, let's keep this. After the entire house is clean, we can do the weeding next week as a phase 2 or something. So there's always, constant, there might be constant change, and there might be some you accept, there might be some that would not be accepted. But this is all part of the stage where you're monitoring, you're controlling the project. Also, this is the stage where a lot of testing is going on. You're ensuring that quality is met before you ship out the product, so to speak, to the client or to your customer. You're also at this stage doing a lot of reporting. People need to be informed. People need to be aware of where we are. For example, the mother could be texting the dad at 10 a.m. and telling him that, okay, we are done with the parlor, and the food is not ready, but the food will be ready soon. That's information. That's communication. That's project reports. You're giving the project the reports or the progress of the project. When it comes to maybe 12 noon, you're stating to the father that, okay, you're almost done with everything. You're only dishing the food right now and stuff like that. So these are the stages everyone would pass through during the course, of managing a project. You'd have to factor in, reporting. You have to factor in change. You're going to have to measuring the project against the project plan. I want to show you something on Planner. There are certain tools that help you to measure the progress of a project, because those tools are able to provide you with things we call burn up and burn down charts. But if you look at a planner as well, a planner can give you an overview of what tasks you have done, what tasks you have left. So before I go into this, a planner is quite easy to use. So basically, when you have a task that's in progress, when the task is completed, for example, you can move that task to the next phase. For example, you say this task is ready for QA, and then you move it to completed whenever it's completed. That way you're able to see what you have as open tasks or the tasks that have not been done yet. You're able to see what has been done. You're able to see what is left, what is completed, and all that. But if you go further into your planner, it gives you some high level information about what tasks are prioritized, which member of the teams are being overworked or have a lot more tasks. And then in some more sophisticated tool, you're able to see things like the progress of the project. Is the project going according to plan, in the sense that are we where we ought to be based on the plan we made? Are we working in that timeline, or have we derailed? Do we now need to formulate a plan to either meet up with the timeline, or do we need to extend the timeline? Why have we not met the or followed the timeline? What happened? These are things you do during the monitoring phase. You ensure that you're keeping to ensure that you're keeping the project within the cost, the timeline, and then it's following what has been planned, and ultimately you're getting quality results that has been put out from the very initiation and planning stage for you to meet. So when all is said and done, when you have tested your product, you have checked for quality, you have completed all of the tasks, all of the milestones, you at the end of the day hand over this project to the client. And like I said earlier on, this is the most interesting part of a project. This is where everything comes together. This is where all of the activities are done. This is where you're handing over the deliverables. You're releasing the project if it's something you'll be taking into a production or a live environment or for consumers to use. This is the most interesting part of a project, because at the end of the day, it gives you a sense of fulfillment. Your team members are able to see that what they have all worked on, has been put out there. And that's one of the greatest things about team members. Team members always like for their work to be appreciated and go out there. Nobody wants to work on something that's at the end of the day nobody is using it or is useless. So there's a fulfillment that comes with yourself and your team members when you get to this stage of a project. And when it is successful, trust me, you will be looking forward to doing more projects and even getting to this phase again. So in a nutshell, we have 5 phases in project management, from the initiation phase to the planning phase to the execution phase to the monitoring and controlling phase and down to the closing phase. All projects go through these stages one way or another until it gets to the very end. Please, does anybody have any question with regards to this, or I'll just move on to the tips for managing a successful project quickly, and then we can ask our questions at the end. Okay, Osas, please go ahead.
Thank you, indeed. Why going through the process, the stages of project execution? You did mention project script.
Scope creep.
I mean scope creep, and you began listing all the scope creep. The question is, do you necessarily have to list all the foreseeable scope creep? Because there are some things that you may not see. Could you just wrap it up in a simple sentence saying every other thing outside this scope constitute a scope creep? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osas. You basically asked the question and answered it. So when planning for a project, during the planning phase where you're identifying what is within scope and what is outside, obviously you might not be able to cover all of the scenarios outside scope, because customers could be really creative in bringing up certain things in the middle of the project. So at that planning phase, there are certain things you can identify that would be outside of the scope of the project. And then in your documentation, you're also putting anything outside what has been put in the scope would constitute scope creep. So that's basically the answer to your question. You document what you can think of in that moment, what you can identify as outside of the scope, and also add that sentence about every other thing outside the main scope. which you already documented, will constitute out of scope.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So there are a lot of tips for managing a project successfully, and they are we cannot exhaust them because every project manager has certain things that has worked for them, and if we decide to go through all of that, then we need to invite a lot more project managers to this platform. But I'm just going to speak about 5 things I consider really important when you manage a project and how you ensure success in your project using these 5 tips. One is clear communication. A project manager communicates. Like, I want to explain the fact that communication just goes beyond speaking with your team members every day in daily stand-up, or speaking with the stakeholders and sending them emails. There's a whole lot that goes into communication, the timing of communication, who you're communicating with. You need to understand all of this, as this would help the kind of communication you're putting out there and who you're communicating to. As a project manager, you need to be able to lead your team. You need strong leadership skills, to manage a project successfully, because you're not only leading your team, you're coaching them. You're coaching your team, because at the end of the day, you don't want it. You want your team to be really independent. You want your team to be decisive. You want your team to be mature enough to handle conflicts. So while you're leading them, you are coaching them, and this would ensure that your project is successful. Because at the end of the day, you don't want your team don't want to feel like you're micromanaging them, and you don't want to even micromanage your team. So you need strong leadership to ensure that your team are doing all they need to do to ensure a successful project. Stakeholder engagement is key to any project you're managing. You cannot have a successful project if your stakeholders don't consider it successful, or if they don't even know what you're doing. So you need to engage with stakeholders, you need to communicate with them, you need to inform them and get certain approval, so to speak, from them. And then another way for you to successfully manage projects is to be able to manage the risks that comes with project, because sometimes certain risks in project would make a project become abandoned project. For example, take those who build a house. Somebody goes to build a house in an area where there are a lot of agberos, right? And you've not factored in the risks that all these omonile, like they like to call them in Lagos, Nigeria. Forgive me if you're in other parts of you're coming from other parts, but they are basically people who feel entitled to your lands, or to whatever you're doing on your land. It's strange. It's hard to explain, but it is what it is in this part. If you don't factor in that these people would at some point encroach or come around and disrupt work, you're going to find out that your project would not be successful. You would likely abandon the project, because they would come and pursue the workers. They will seize the instruments of those, the builders, their pan and all of that. So all of these are the risks that you have to be aware of, and you have to factor in the course of your project, so that you can have a successful project. And another tip you have to ensure you have to know in managing a project is that there's a need for continuous feedback. There's a need for monitoring the project, getting feedback and remedying those feedback. And then I would explain that as we talk more on this tip. So for the first one, clear communication, you need to be present with your team. For example, your development team will consist of different people, different skill sets. You need to be able to communicate clearly with them, set the expectation very, very distinctly amongst each of them. For example, the QA is the gatekeeper. He needs to know what he is checking for. The front-end developer, for example, needs to know what he's working on. Everybody needs to understand how each of their roles, tantamount to the overall goal of the project. So you have to communicate this clearly and ensure that once the business has its goal, whatever each of your team members are working on ties to that goal, so that somebody is not working on something that is abstract to what you're trying to achieve. So your product owner understands what they are trying to achieve. They are communicating it in their user story, for example, properly. so that when the developers are working on the user story, it is what you expect them to work on. And then in terms of communication, your team members need to know that you are there for them. This is one thing some project managers tend to forget. They feel like they are their job is just to um come and do alpha. Have you finished? No, you need to be able to be in sync with your developers or with whoever is doing the work. You need to have certain skills like empathy, because when developers realize that it is all of you that are in this together, there is a sense of ownership they take on, rather than you bossing them or you making them feel like they are they don't matter. What just needs to be done is the work. No, these people matter because they are, especially when you're working with developers, they are creative people, and sometimes they have blocks, just like a writer would. So um, being able to get them to relax, motivate them properly, is all part of being able to communicate to them in ways that resonate with them. Also, as part of what you need to manage a project successfully is being able to update your stakeholders regularly. This would come in form of reports, in form of email. You need to know, when we get into the stakeholder part, you need to know who you're communicating to, who needs to be informed in, who needs to be responsible for certain things, who you need to consult. I'll get into that as we go along. But communication is a skill that a project manager has to harness if he has any chance of managing a project successfully. And not just communication with your team members, but communication to external stakeholders. You need to inform on the progress of the project. You need to inform those who would be assisting you when you will need their assistance. For example, if you're doing a project that requires IT to set up certain things on users' computer, you need to communicate with IT so that they do it properly and they don't jeopardize your project. You need to give them all the information they would need for them to provide what they need to provide to you. These communications are very essential. You don't just go about, making a WhatsApp call or a phone call. Oh, I'll need this, I'll need this. You need things to be communicated properly, even over email, in the right way. Like I said, communication goes beyond just saying the words, but how you say it, how you present it to them, and in the manner you present it to them. And sometimes I find it really important to know the time to present certain information to people. So, for example, you come into the workplace and there is maybe over a weekend, there is an important thing to be done on Monday. You don't send that email on a Friday night or on a Saturday morning. It would likely be missed. You need to know that these are emails that need to come on Monday morning, so that whoever is coming to their system, they are seeing that email immediately. These are very small details, but sometimes they tend to matter a lot in how people respond to you and when they respond to you. Now, in terms of communication, I showed you tools you could use. For example, I use Planner myself. I use Jira as well. These are tools where things are clearly spelled out. What everybody is expected to do is spelled out. For example, from what I showed, you could see that a certain person is responsible for these tasks. Another person is responsible for these tasks. If you open those tasks, you get to see, what's the description of the tasks. Like maybe if you're developing a product, you see that as a user, I expect to do this, so I can achieve this result. That's a user story. And then you're seeing the acceptance criteria. How do you know that these things have been done? The acceptance criteria has been met. So you need to use collaborative tools to ensure that your communication is really clear, with your developers, with those you're working with, and you would almost be guaranteed of a successful project. Now, I talked about strong leadership. When you work with people, you realize that a part of project management involves people management. You are not just managing technical activities alone. You're managing people who would execute these activities. So you need to have a certain level of charisma that these people would respect. Because at the end of the day, the success and failure of a project would come down to how well the project manager has also, been able to manage the people who would execute this. Because stakeholders may not really know who the engineers are, may not even know one who is doing a specific task, they know that the project manager is in charge of deciding who is working on what. So if you don't if you don't have the aura or the charisma to guide a team to do what they need to do, your project would likely not go in the way it needs to go. So you need to be emotionally intelligent about how you deal with people. I've said this before. You need to know how each member of your team, what makes them tick. You need to know that when you're talking to, for example, engineer A, you cannot tell engineer A, oh, do this task. It's a small thing. You should do it. No, some engineers don't like to hear such things. They don't like to hear that I did a small task. It annoys them. Others like to have fun when they do things. So when they tell you something, they want you to know that, oh, they are joking in this moment, and they need you to play into that. So people are different, and then your intelligence emotionally would help you navigate and lead them. You also need to care about people. I always tell young project managers when I talk to them that you cannot expect people to go above and beyond for you if they don't think you care enough about them. So you need to, while you are very serious with work, you also need to, inject a bit of, not play in this sense, but inject a bit of, I care about your well-being, but you need to do this thing. It comes with experience also. Trust me, it's not something you always learn in a book. It comes with experience, but you need to know at the back of your mind, you need to 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 care about your people. And another act of being a strong leader is being able to resolve conflict quickly. Conflicts can make or mar a team. So you need to help your team members become so mature that conflict is not seen as a negative thing, but as a positive thing. So take, for example, project managers sometimes are not very technical, and there are conflicts in teams, especially when it's technical conflict. How do we go about the implementation? It is your job, or it is your duty as a project manager to help the team navigate these conflicts in the best possible way by asking them powerful questions that would elicit certain thoughts, questions that would help them come and arrive at a solution. Because at the end of the day, when team members have complete conflict about how to go about a particular implementation, neither of them might be wrong. You could look at those two solutions or the two ideas they brought individually, and both of them will get you to the finish line. Now, how do you now ensure that you pick one that the team would go about with and that everybody would agree to, not necessarily I'm just doing it because the project manager has to do it. You have to now sit with everyone, help them to see the pros and cons of each way, and at the end of the day, you are making sure that all of this ties to the goal of the project. So your leadership skills goes beyond just coming to say, what have you done, what have you not done, or handling scrum meetings or dailies. No, it goes with being part of the team and helping the team to resolve conflict, coaching the team as well. And with all of this, you would definitely have a mature team, which to a large extent guarantees you success in your project. And if we are looking at stakeholders engagement, like I talked about, you cannot have a successful project if you don't engage with your with your stakeholders. Stakeholders come in various forms. They could be external, they could be internal, but you need to first identify who they are. Once you're able to identify who they are, then you know how to communicate with them. You understand their need. And how do you identify them? In project, we have what we call the RACI matrix. RACI simply means R is for responsible, A is for accountable, C is for consult, and I is for inform. So you need to know who is responsible for this task. The person responsible for a task is, like the word implies, the person who is doing that particular execution. Now, who is accountable might not necessarily be doing the execution, but is the owner of the task that the responsible person is doing. So an accountable person could be a team manager or a product owner or a project owner who, while he might not be doing the hands-on execution, he's responsible for the success of that task that the responsible person is doing. So the information you're taking to this person, you need to know that this is the person's role before you take certain information to him. Now, who do we call the these people in the category of C consult. These are people who you don't necessarily their opinions are not. It's not a must that you take their opinion or you get their opinion, but their opinions are usually very informed. So you want to consult them and hear what they have to think. Not that there's an obligation for you to always use what they say, but it is important that you get their what their idea, their opinion, because it might really be good for your project. And those that are informed are mostly high level stakeholders, just want to know what's going on without necessarily making an input. So once you can understand the different roles of your stakeholders, you'd understand what they expect and you know how to communicate with them. For example, you need certain things to be fixed on maybe the client environment, and then you need to reach out to IT. You're not going to reach out to the CEO to ask him that you need IT to set up a license for certain things. It would be foolhardy if you do that. That's not you engaging the stakeholders properly. Now you now need to go to either the project manager of the other team or you go to the head of IT, because this is a task that he would be accountable for. So he can give you somebody who will be responsible for assigning that license to you. This is a way to properly manage stakeholders and their expectations. And more importantly, stakeholders need to feel a sense of the progress of the project. They need to be informed. They need to be involved. Now we have come to an age where most projects are managed remotely. Back in the days where we have to go to a physical site, we still do for some projects, but then it was prevalent that you go to a physical site. It was easy to even keep stakeholders informed and involved, because those points they see you coming to their office in the morning and then they see you leave by 4 or 5 p.m. There's a sense of, oh, you have come, you've worked. But now that we manage projects remotely, you have to keep them really informed. If not, there will be a sense of, is anything even going on, or what is even going on? So stakeholders need to get maybe weekly reviews. You have a session where you show what you've done, especially if you're working on an agile project. Iteratively, you're showing, okay, this is what we've achieved in this iteration. This is what we plan to achieve in the next iteration. You're sending reports out there. They're able to see the progress of your project, how updated your project plan is, your timeline, if there are risks, if there are dependencies. You're looking at if there are any delays to the project, who's responsible for those delays, how do you intend to fix those delays. A report can basically save you a lot of explanation with stakeholders, because they get to see, especially a detailed report, they get to see what's going on and can even contribute. So what stakeholders do is they also help you remove impediments. If a stakeholder is aware that maybe you've not gotten a particular item because somebody is on leave, he can really assign somebody else to provide you that information, or even speak to people who are supposed to give you certain approvals to give you those approvals on time. So they need to be informed and involved, because to an extent they can make certain things move faster or move in the right direction for you as a project manager. So stakeholders involvement is very key to the success of a project. And then I cannot stop talking about risk management, because like I gave the example of how a project will be abandoned because of certain risks that were not factored, were not thought about from the onset. Risk management is key to the success of any project. If you do not factor in how to respond to risks, or have a risk mindset, you would find out that when things are thrown your way in the course of the project, you will just get tired. You will just feel like this project is bound to fail, not realizing that these are just risks that could be managed. These are risks that if you are risk averse, you would find a way around them. It might affect one or two things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying risks will come and will disappear. Some risks come and you have to accept them. There's nothing you can do about them, and they affect your timeline or they affect your scope. But if you plan up, if you have a plan from the onset, then you will find a way around it. For example, you're building a house. Let's take you're building a house, and you do a slab, and it's raining heavily. If you had planned in the early stage of a project that this is raining season, so do we work on this at this time, or do we wait to dry season? You would have been able to see that there's a risk of rain not allowing some of your concrete work to dry on time. So you would have decided back then to either put a hold on the concrete work at some point, or um, found another way to do the concrete wall, maybe before the rainy season starts or something. You would have found the solution to it. That's the idea of planning for risks early on. Now, there are certain risks you cannot cover, they will just show up in the course of the project. In those cases, yes, this is where you now sit as a team, you sit as a committee and decide how to move with these risks. Are you going to accept these risks? How does these risks affect the project? And then you develop mitigation strategies and plan, and you monitor how these risks goes through till the end of the project. So risk management is something I think, I believe, and by experience, is a key to managing a successful project. And last but not the least is continuous feedback. I always feel like I know for a fact that when you manage projects, sometimes the pictures you have at the beginning of the project, at the end of the project, might not be the picture you get. And this is the reason, because at the end of the day, people things become clearer when they are put in place. So if, for example, you want to build an application, you could sit now and design an application and say this application should have A feature, B feature, C feature. And in the course of implementation, you realize that things have changed. There should be a D feature, maybe a feature that should, okay, for example, you want to sign, let's even use an application sign in method. And then when you start this application, you say people should sign in with their name and their email address and password. During the course of the implementation, you realize that people who are using this application, there's a bit of Gen Z people who would like to sign in with their social media handle. You add that feature. You realize that when the application people start, maybe when you release the first phase, people start testing and they say, why can't I sign in with my fingerprint? And then you realize that, that is a very interesting concept. And then you have to, feedback helps you to not only improve on your project, but helps you to see how you can, what areas you have not done so well, and how you can also improve those areas. So we have certain activities, even if as a scrum master that I am as well, you realize that there are certain activities that cater to this. So when you do a sprint review with the clients, you show them what has been released, you thereafter do a sprint retrospect with your team members. And then one of the things you do in the retrospect is you look back at what you have done, the sprint, what you have implemented, and you're looking at what have we done well in this sprint, what did we not do so well, and what can we do better going to the next sprint. So when you have a continuous feedback loop where you are open to learning more and continuous learning, it just ensures that at the end of the day, your project is successful. So if you start inputting feedback, early on in the execution phase of your project, what your end result would be nothing more than a successful project, because at the end of the day, the stakeholders' feedback would have been infused in the final product, and they will be proud of what you have developed for them. Regular reviews are part of ways to get this feedback, and then we have come into a world where we work as an agile team. So this simply means that we are not rigid to say, once we formulated the plan, this is the plan. No, there is no going left or right. No, once you are able to understand and work in the agile mindset, which is incremental deliveries, you realize that your plans can change. You can adjust your plans as necessary, so that at the end of the day, you are getting, because at the end of the day, the finished product is very important, not the fact that, I followed a plan. No, you have to be ready to deliver a product to the satisfaction of your stakeholders. And if you follow these tips, I can tell you for free that I have done them and I have achieved successes in my various projects. I think I've spoken beyond the time allowed to me. If you let me, I would keep speaking and speaking and speaking. So at this point, I would just conclude by saying that all projects go through the various stages of project management. And if you apply yourself, you apply the processes and you apply the skill sets, to your project, it is inevitable that you achieve success in your project. There will be a maximization of your resources, and your processes would be efficient. So you would improve the efficiency of your project and manage your risk successfully, and your project would be a success. Thank you very much for obliging me, and I'll take questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Ndi. Thank you. I mean, you said something during the call that it's not we can't exhaust everything in this time frame. And I believe so much that you have poured a lot. You've given us a lot of tips. You've given us a lot of, I mean, project management 101 that we need to get moving with our projects, personal projects and career projects and group Techstylers group projects that have been assigned to us all. Really appreciate you. Thank you for pointing out yourself and for giving us those tips that we probably would have paid for outside of this meeting. And Elsa's hand is up, but before then, I like those that are not able to raise up their hands or do not want to speak. Please drop your questions in the Q&A. I also like to inform you in the freaking that in the chat box we've had a bit of activity going on. Not questions as such, but activities to show that we've been following you. We've been taking the tips. People have asked for the project tracker that you use. That has been responded to because I mean my people are gingered. We want to get right into using those tools for our projects. And then we've done a recap of the stages of the project management that you have taken us through. We've had a bit of engagement on that end. And so, I mean, yes, you have, we are understanding a lot of what you have told us, and we'll certainly take it forward. So, Osa, please can proceed with your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Isosa. My question, thank you very much, Indy. Very insightful. Yeah,
Sorry
it's
about that.
okay. Um, my question is this. You did mention communication to stakeholders. At what point do you define your communication matrix? Is it at the project initialization meeting? Because I'm aware that some stakeholders have preferred style of communication, right? It could be virtual meetings, it could be physical meetings, it could be mails and all that. At what point do you define your communication matrix? That's one. On the other hand, some project managers are involved in project costing, right? While on the other hand, there are some project managers that just bring them into the project to manage the entire phase of the project. I've been involved in projects in the past where I determine the costs to technology, that's to IT, to deliver that project. For example, if I'm giving a programmer, a UI UX designer and all that, I determine the cost of releasing that resources for the time frame and all that. To what extent should a project manager be involved in costing? Because I realize the general practice is that they just bring you to handle projects, whether it is profitable to you as a business or not. There's no inside depth to that aspect of project management. I've been involved in costing, right? Because I worked in a projectized environment where we deliver softwares, right? And I was in technology. So if the business side of the firm says they need a particular software, I need to determine what the cost would be to us as technology. So I want more clarity on that. And then for the project charter, when developing the project charter, there are times that you have to include the cost of certain things. For example, you are getting a template. I remember when we are developing maybe some SharePoint portals and all that, we need to buy some templates, right? To what extent, again, is a project manager involved in, buying because sometimes we have to book some money, set some money aside for certain things that may be needed in the cost of executing that. It could be a resource. It could be a resource that is needed, right? And all those details are included in the project charter. So if you could provide some insights, some clarity, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Ayusa. Forgive me if I pronounce that wrongly. So I'll go to your first question about establishing a communication plan. Now, at what point is this done? That's the question. So basically, the communication plan is established at the planning phase. So usually at the planning phase, the end of the planning phase usually signifies where you have your kickoff meeting with the client. And sometimes during the meeting, sometimes before that meeting is where you agree on how they want to receive their communication. So some clients will tell you, I need to be informed via mail every day or on progress on a weekly basis. Maybe you send me a report on a weekly basis. Some would ask that you have a review meeting with them every week and send a report to them. Some wants to be involved in your tool, maybe Azure, DevOps or Jira. They want to be privy to it to see how progress is being made, where tasks are being moved on a daily basis, what stories you're creating, what user stories you're creating, or what your backlog looks like. This is determined during the kickoff meeting, sometimes before, but mostly during the kickoff meeting. It's something you determine while you're planning for the project, while you're planning for how you inform stakeholders, while you're planning your risks, while you've planned the scope and all that. You send all of this to the client and then they determine if it works for them. You could make suggestions or they could just give you what they want it to be, and then you point it out during the kickoff meeting. If they accept it, good. If they don't, they suggest what they would like or how they would like to be informed, and that's how you would do, or that's how you keep them informed during the course of the project. Now, for your second question regarding who determines costs and all of that, there are different contracts when you manage project. There are one-time contracts where you're signing a project is going to a project is you want to execute is they are signing a cost from the very beginning that this project we want to spend 10 naira on this project, or you're giving, or you who is developing the project, you are giving them a one-time cost to develop XYZ app. We are charging you 100 naira, and that's the one-time cost. Now there are projects where we call them time and resource projects. So you're basically charging them on the go. So you're saying, for example, resource A costs 5 naira. If you're using resource A for 5 hours, you'll be paying 25 naira. So in such projects, you bill the client maybe on a monthly basis, either on a monthly fee for each resource or on an hourly fee. So you could say this project will take us 6 months. I would need 10 people. These 10 people, these are their costs. At the end of the day, you're going to need somebody extra in the middle of the project. Maybe you need an additional QA. You're going to send the cost because there's no one-time agreed cost. You would have to manage the project based on the resources and the time that each resource would cost. This way, you're sending invoice on a more regular basis, or you are providing them, the hours that each person has worked on, or one resource has worked on, and what is the cost for this resource. That's another way to manage the cost for a project. So it depends on what contract you have agreed with your client from the very beginning. That is how you would manage costs. Now, for the last question on project charter, if I'm correct, you said where would the cost be factored into the project charter? Please, could you come again with that question?
Yes, you got it right. For example, you need to buy some template for developing maybe a portal or anything, or a resource that is not even available within your disposal and you need to hire. So how do you factor in such cost? Thank you.
Yes, so at the end of the day, every project is managed, like I said, based on the kind of contracts you've agreed on. If it's a one-time cost kind of project, you have, even if you've not factored this in, there's no hard and fast rule about how you go about it. For me, for example, if there's something that needs to be done now that was not earlier on factored in. What you need to do is now go back to the client and inform them about this, in the sense that you're telling them that this was not originally factored in. It doesn't look good on you all of the time, especially if it's something you ought to have factored in the first place, right? But except you're willing to bear that cost, then you need to go back to the client, inform them of why this needs to be. And with most projects, people have buffers. For example, when you prepare your, if you're doing a one-time cost, you have created buffers to cater for things unexpected, right? And if that cost is approved, then you already have buffers, you already have something to take care of it. But if it's a time and material project, then it works just like I explained it. You go and say you need a license or you need a template, you add it to your monthly invoice. I currently manage a project where every month we need to get a webflow license, for the UI guy to work with his front end. Um, while I send the cost for this particular resource, I also send the cost for this license every month. The month they decide they're not going to be using that particular license, then they don't need it. So it depends on the contracts, the kind of project contract you're working with. It will determine how you would manage, when extra, unexpected costs come out or come up during the course of the project.
Thank you,
Yes, you
thank
can
you,
also
Indy.
call it. Yep.
Yeah, when changes come into and the cap sits and determines the effect of change on the existing project scope and all that, sometimes it could incur some costs that were not initially factored into the project.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Deyemi, thank you for that. Yes, there's also that there's certain costs that would come during the course of a project that was not originally factored. And like my boss also said, there is a contingency budget that sometimes you have to refer to. Um, it might, if you've had this before the project started, fine, it's very easy to fall back to your contingency budget. And if not, at the end of the day, you have to inform the proper stakeholders about this new cost, why it's important, and you would likely get an approval. And if you don't get an approval, you also state the effect of whatever it is you're not getting due to that budget not being approved, what it will impact in your project.
Crystal, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question?
Thank
Ninola,
you,
you have your hand
Indy.
too.
Yes.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
All right. Good day, everyone, from wherever you're watching from. Thank you very much, Indy Freke. Just to add a context to what Indy Freke has been saying since, amazing presentation. So for iSourcer, I hope I got that right. I can see that you are in a waterfall environment. And for those that are familiar with agile methodology, the questions you've asked is more of the responsibility of a product manager. So in agile methodology, you have the scrum master who acts more like a project manager, but is not taking up all the is not taking up the entire responsibility of a project manager, like in the waterfall environment that you're in. And there's the product manager that takes up the responsibility. So the cost, the communication, and all of that you're talking about, falls under the responsibility of the product manager when you're looking at agile methodology. And that's when you talk about your daily stand-up meeting, resources and all of that. And just like Indy Freke had said, you always have your planning. So for those that are in using agile methodology or agile environment, you have your planning depending on the number of phases you have on that particular project. You have your planning at each sprint, to talk about the communication, to talk about the resources, to talk about the cost and everything that you need, which makes life a lot easier. So for that, you don't have cases of maybe like contingency plans or contingency budgets, because you had already factored that at the beginning of each sprint for the rest of the project. So I just thought I should add that, because some people may be in agile
Yeah.
environment, and they will just be wondering what are they talking about. Again, in Agile, you don't have anything like the project charter and all of that. So thank you very much. Good job, Andy.
Yeah. Thank you, Niela.
I like to mention here that Nihila, we call her Ellie, she's our global president and she's a Forbes technology member. So if you can see her thumbnail on her team's picture, you see that she's a Forbes member and she has decided to be humble today. And so Nihila, thank you for dropping the insights and for, responding to, you're laughing, responding to the questioning. I mean, that's subtle way. Thank you. I appreciate you. Okay, I do not see any hands in any questions or any hands. It means that in fact what we have is um people telling us a lot more about contingency budget, about what they are learning. So we have to say thank you. Chukwudi also mentioned something about variations and how contractors make money out of it. We really say thank you, Ndifrike, for this session. It's really been insightful. And on our next, we have a bit of session after this, about 15 minutes. I posted a bit of questions for us, for our project self, so that let's do a bit of reflection. I asked, do we get all the stages of the project? Where are we on our group projects? And have we chosen a team lead? What are the risks that we have identified in our current project? And what is there a communication plan? Or how are we taking this into our group projects that we're currently working on? Yes, we have a timeline, and it's our timeline for the project is 20th July. So let us so we thank Ndi for his session and we thank him for the boosts that he has given to us. And so would call this this is my vote of thanks to Indy, saying thank you very much. And so very briskly, we are now answering project-based questions. That's our group project-based questions. And I'll spotlight MJ, that's Olajumoke, so that if there are any questions, leaders on the call can attend to those very briefly. So does anyone have project-based questions or what we have learned today, especially? Or could I just call random names and then ask us what stage we are in our current project, and if you've chosen your team lead, what's your communication plan? For the communication plan, I mean, I heard that we know that some people are not communicating with the other team members. So yes, the question, what is the communication plan outside of trying to reach them on Teams because they haven't responded? Can anyone share insights with regards to how their team has been able to communicate with other people?
So, Lara, I think I see a bit of progress with communication in some of the WhatsApp group because I had to join a couple of the WhatsApp group. Let me not say all of it, and I've been seeing some of progress around that. I mean, so I guess a lot of them are also finding ways to get to know each other and then settle into the real work, really. So, okay. All right. And once again, I want to say very big thank you to NG. I mean, this was just a 2 days notice. What am I saying? 1.5 days notice. And then, that's one of the things I'm so proud of the people in my space. You just call them on the spot and then there they are doing the great things for us. Thank you so much, Andy. We really appreciate this. I mean, it's very insightful. I want to believe that a lot of us are going on with something that is very valuable and to help us not only on this project, but in our career also. Thank you so much, Andy, once again. I think, Lara, that question, yes. Should I go ahead and answer? Yes, the video will be made available. The recording will be made available. but I can see a lot of communications with projects in WhatsApp groups. So I'm seeing them settling in. I mean, I do a lot of work. I mean, just passing by. I just said I'm just passing by just to see what's going on, and I see some progress. The project mentors have been quite very, very, very helpful. So I want to appreciate all of those people also taking out time. Taking out time. I think we should give it a thumbs up to all of our project mentors. I mean, in their very busy schedule, they're just doing the fantastic work they're doing. So, sure appreciate them. All right then, Lara, over to you. I'm not stealing your show, please.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm giving you the space for project related questions. So I have one question with regards to the projects, and the question has already been answered. Someone was asking that there are just a few people in their group that have joined so far. So MJ, I'd like you to throw a general light now to those people
Okay.
who maybe they are for 19 in a group and they have just 7 that have joined. Can you show some insights into what we feel like they should do? I know we spoke about it during the week, so can we just give them a bit of insight?
Okay, all right, thank you. So, I mean, I think this question I'll answer it in 3 ways. One, if you are in a group and probably maybe I've seen questions around the power, the person that is responsible for, I mean, the participants that are meant for the power apps or the power platform are not